Most people collect food scraps in a bin on the kitchen counter or under the sink, or even store them in the freezer. So one thing I've heard a lot of people say when they're trying to get started on their compost journey or they're making compost journey is that there's a little bit of an ick factor. You can get fruit flies or stinky smells that people don't enjoy having in their kitchen. So what I have developed for my plan to deal with that is I have this pot that I got from a local thrift store and found a lid that fit, also at my local thrift store, that I keep in my refrigerator, and I put all of my food scraps conveniently through the week. Sometimes it doesn't last that long, depends on how big your family is. I started out with a little layer of wood chips, so if there's any moisture from that, it collects in the bottom and it doesn't start to get funky. It stays a little bit drier and nice. And then when I'm ready, this is full and I don't feel like dealing with my compost pile, I do keep a bucket where I also started off with some wood chips, and then I can dump my food scraps. See, there's the wood chips. The really important thing is just to always make sure that you keep that food scraps covered. So after I do that, I keep a box nearby with some wood chips that I can just throw a couple handfuls. I think 3 is usually about right for me, so that you don't continue to have bugs or bad smells in your kitchen. I like to keep a box with the mulch, the extra wood chips that I'm using, on top of the bucket so that it's not sealed and it can breathe. It also helps to filter out any potential odors from coming out into the space that you're keeping the bucket in, and it keeps the wood chips handy for when you need to use them. As a new backyard composter, you're going to want to keep your compost pile vegan. You're going to want to keep meat and dairy and bones out of the compost pile. It just attracts too many pests from the neighborhood. Also, pet waste, poop, doesn't belong in there. You're going to want to keep that out. So let's make compost. First, you have to choose a spot in your yard that you'd like to have a compost bin. I chose this spot because there's a big tree overhead, so it stays shaded. You're probably not going to want to work in the sun, and the direct sun can dry out your compost pile. And then you need to choose a bin. This is my compost bin. I built it out of wood scraps from a reclaimed deck that somebody had to take out. You can go a lot smaller, they have tumblers, they have all kinds of things. The basic compost recipe is really the most important part, and finding a system that's convenient for you. I would recommend, as you're starting out, that you keep the food scraps to like 1/3 green materials, we like to say, versus the brown materials like the wood chips and shredded paper and things like that. This is a 3-bin system, so I can make compost in one bin and then turn it into another one, or I can keep a pile of feedstocks, whatever works best for what I'm doing, what I'm working with at that time. I do find that if you have too small of a compost pile, it might not heat up. So a good recommendation is to have it be somewhere around 3 feet wide by 3 feet deep by 3 feet tall, and that way it has enough material so that when the microbes are in there doing all their great work, it'll retain the heat so that it gets nice and hot for you. You can feel if it's nice and warm, but one of these compost thermometers really helps. They're designed to be a little bit longer so they can get down into the center of your pile, and they have a nice rating. This one even has like a green zone that shows you where it's in the perfect range for it to be killing pathogens like E. coli and salmonella. And that way you can feel confident that your compost is cooking and doing what it's supposed to. So if you want to check your moisture level, you're going to want to like dig down and grab some of this stuff. You probably want to have your gloves on, and then you want to give it a squeeze. And if you can get, do you see a couple of just a little bit of moisture coming out of there, like a wrung out damp sponge, then that's about the right amount. If there's like a whole bunch and it's just running down your arm, it's too wet and you're maybe going to get some stinky compost, and that's where the odors come from. You're going to want it to be drier than that. So then you can add woody materials to bulk it up if you've got it too wet, and if it's too dry, then you can add more food scraps or you can water your pile. I turn mine probably about every 3 weeks. I know some people like to turn it more often and some people don't like to turn it at all. The more you turn it and keep it nice and moist, the sooner you'll have finished compost. If you keep it the right moisture level and enough oxygen in the pile, you should have good finished compost in 3 to 6 months. Happy composting.